A year had passed since the Valeth's visit, and Earth felt like a different place. The scars of the challenges remained: crumbled buildings, empty fields where forests once stood, and quiet memorials for those lost during the trials. But so did the signs of growth. Humanity had taken its second chance seriously, striving to build a world that reflected the best of what it could be. It wasn't perfect, but it was moving forward. Liam and Claire found themselves at the heart of this change, though neither sought recognition. Liam continued hosting community workshops, now expanded into a nationwide program called Building Together. People from all walks of life came together to share skills, ideas, and resources. What started as small gatherings in Brooklyn had grown into a movement that inspired towns and cities across the globe. Claire, meanwhile, became a voice for ethical use of the Valeth's technology. She joined panels discussing how to balance innovation with compassion, ensuring no one was left behind. Her experiences at the hospital gave her a unique perspective, and she often reminded others that progress meant nothing if it didn't improve lives equally. One sunny afternoon, Liam and Claire attended a ceremony unveiling a new school built entirely with alien blueprints. The building gleamed under the bright sky, its solar panels glinting like jewels. Children ran through the halls, laughing and exploring classrooms filled with tools designed to spark curiosity. Mia Johnson stood at the front of the crowd, beaming with pride, as she thanked everyone who had helped make the project possible. Afterward, Liam pulled Claire aside. "Do you remember when we thought this might all fall apart?" he asked, gesturing toward the bustling scene around them. She laughed softly. "How could I forget? But look at us now." The truth was, humanity had come farther than anyone expected. Project Horizon had succeeded in sharing the Valeth's gifts more equitably, reducing disparities between regions. Renewable energy powered homes and businesses, medical advancements saved lives daily, and sustainable farming revitalized struggling communities. Even global tensions eased as nations worked together to tackle shared challenges. But perhaps the most profound change was harder to measure. People carried themselves differently now, with a sense of purpose and responsibility. Acts of kindness became less extraordinary and more ordinary, woven into the fabric of everyday life. Neighbors helped neighbors without expecting anything in return. Strangers offered smiles or words of encouragement. Humanity seemed to understand, at last, that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about thriving together. That evening, Liam and Claire sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and the distant hum of laughter echoed from the park down the street. It was a peaceful moment, one they'd dreamed of during the darkest days of the trials. "We've come so far," Claire said quietly, leaning her head against Liam's shoulder. "And there's still so much farther to go," he replied. "But I think we're ready." They fell silent, reflecting on everything they'd witnessed: the fear, the courage, the failures, and the triumphs. Each step had been imperfect, yet meaningful. Humanity hadn't earned its second chance because it was flawless. It had earned it because it refused to give up. Later that night, as they tucked into bed, Claire turned to Liam with a smile. "Do you think the Valeth are watching us?" "I don't know," Liam admitted. "But if they are, I hope they're proud." Somewhere beyond the stars, the Valeth might have been observing, or maybe they had moved on to test another species. Either way, humanity no longer looked to the skies for validation. Instead, it focused on the ground beneath its feet, determined to nurture the fragile, beautiful planet it called home. As sleep claimed them, Liam and Claire dreamed not of aliens or tests, but of a future shaped by resilience, compassion, and hope. Imperfection was part of being human, but so was the capacity to grow, to heal, and to shine. And in that light, humanity found its greatest strength. The months following the Valeth's departure brought both progress and setbacks. Humanity had been given a second chance, but it was clear that building a better future wouldn't be easy. The advanced knowledge left behind by the aliens continued to inspire innovation, Yet it also highlighted the deep inequalities that still divided the world. Some regions thrived with new technologies, while others struggled to adapt, creating tensions that threatened to undo the fragile unity forged during the trials. Liam noticed these disparities firsthand as he traveled for community workshops. In wealthier areas, people embraced the changes enthusiastically, using the alien tech to improve their lives in ways they'd never imagined. But in poorer neighborhoods, frustration simmered beneath the surface. Many felt left behind, unable to access the tools or training needed to benefit from the breakthroughs. At one meeting in a struggling town, a man stood up and voiced his anger. "Why should we trust this?" he demanded, gesturing toward a prototype solar panel on display. "It feels like another way for the rich to get richer while the rest of us stay stuck." Liam listened carefully, knowing the man's concerns were valid. He didn't have all the answers, but he believed honest conversations were the first step toward finding solutions. "You're right to question it," Liam said calmly. "But instead of letting it divide us, what if we work together to make sure no one gets left behind?" His words sparked a lively discussion. By the end of the session, several attendees agreed to form a committee to advocate for fairer distribution of resources. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And that gave Liam hope. Meanwhile, Claire faced her own challenges at the hospital. While many patients benefited from medical advancements made possible by the Valeth's gifts, others grew wary of relying too heavily on unfamiliar technology. One elderly woman refused treatment involving an alien-designed device, insisting she preferred traditional methods. Claire respected her choice but couldn't help feeling conflicted. How could humanity balance progress with trust? These questions weighed on her mind as she walked home one evening. Snow crunched underfoot, and the cold air stung her cheeks. When she reached the apartment, Liam greeted her with a warm smile and a cup of tea. They sat together by the window, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark sky. "What happens if we can't fix everything?" Claire asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "What if we mess this up too?" Liam thought for a moment before responding. "We probably will mess some things up," he admitted. "But I think the Valeth knew that when they gave us this chance. They didn't expect perfection. They just wanted to see that we try." Claire nodded slowly, sipping her tea. She thought about the patients she'd helped, the families who had come together despite their differences, and the countless small acts of kindness she'd witnessed. Maybe trying really was enough. As spring approached, signs of renewal began to appear everywhere. Trees blossomed, parks filled with laughter, and communities rallied around shared goals. Mia Johnson became a symbol of this resilience, leading efforts to rebuild schools destroyed during the simulation. Her energy inspired others to join, turning once abandoned buildings into vibrant centers of learning. Even global leaders started taking notice. A summit was organized to address lingering inequalities, bringing representatives from every corner of the world to discuss how to share the benefits of the Valeth's gifts more fairly. Though disagreements arose, there was a growing sense of responsibility, a recognition that humanity's survival depended not just on individual success, but collective well-being. One evening, Liam received an unexpected visit from Ethan Brooks. The astrophysicist looked tired, but hopeful as he explained why he'd come. "I've been thinking about something," Ethan said. "The Valeth tested us not because they doubted us, but because they wanted to see if we deserved this opportunity. Now it's our turn to prove them right. Not just today, but every day moving forward." Liam nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Humanity had passed the ultimate test, but the real challenge lay ahead, building a world worthy of the second chance it had been given. As Ethan left, Liam turned to Claire, who was reading quietly by the lamp. "Do you think we're ready?" he asked softly. She smiled, closing her book. "We have to be. Because giving up isn't an option anymore." Together, they gazed out the window at the stars above, reminders of the vast universe beyond. and the fragile, beautiful planet they called home. Inspired by these conversations, Liam decided to take action. With Claire's encouragement, he started hosting community meetings at the local library, inviting neighbors to discuss challenges facing their area and brainstorm solutions. At first, attendance was low and skepticism ran high. But slowly, more people began showing up, eager to contribute ideas and lend a hand. Mia Johnson joined the effort, bringing energy and fresh perspectives. Together, they organized workshops teaching practical skills like gardening, basic engineering, and conflict resolution. The goal was simple: empower people to solve problems on their own, rather than waiting for someone else to fix things. Over time, the initiative grew, spreading to other neighborhoods and cities. Meanwhile, Project Horizon continued making strides in sharing the Veilith's technology equitably. Innovations once seen as luxuries became lifelines for struggling communities. Solar panels powered remote villages, medical devices saved lives in underserved areas, and sustainable farming techniques revitalized barren lands. People marveled at how quickly the world could change when everyone worked toward the same goal. Yet challenges persisted. Wealth disparities widened in some places, fueling resentment and protests. Governments clashed over policies, and old rivalries resurfaced. Still, there were moments of triumph: a village coming together to build a school, a city planting trees to combat pollution, a family adopting a child orphaned during the trials. Each act of kindness reminded humanity of its potential. As winter approached, Liam and Claire stood outside their apartment building, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. Children laughed nearby, building snowmen and tossing snowballs. Life moved forward, carrying scars but also hope. "We've been given a gift," Claire said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just the tech, but the chance to start over. And we're doing okay so far," Liam added with a smile. "Not perfect, but okay. For now." That was enough. The documentary about the Veilith's visit became a turning point for humanity. It wasn't just a recounting of events. It was a mirror reflecting both the best and worst of what people had done during the challenges. Audiences around the world watched intently, their emotions swinging between pride and shame as they saw themselves in the stories shared by survivors like Liam, Claire, and Mia. For many, it was the first time they truly understood how far humanity had come, and how much work still lay ahead. Liam felt nervous watching the final cut of the film. He hadn't expected his role to be highlighted so prominently, but Ethan explained that ordinary voices were essential to telling the story authentically. Sitting beside Claire on their couch, Liam gripped her hand tightly as scenes of chaos and courage unfolded on screen. When his interview appeared, he spoke candidly about fear, failure, and hope. "We didn't win because we're perfect," he said in the footage. "We won because we refused to quit." Those words resonated deeply with viewers. Social media lit up with discussions about resilience, morality, and the importance of working together. Schools incorporated the documentary into their curriculums, using it to teach lessons in ethics, science, and history. Even governments referenced it in speeches, emphasizing the need for unity in addressing global issues like climate change and inequality. But not everyone celebrated the newfound optimism. Critics argued that focusing on the positive ignored the darker aspects of human nature exposed during the trials. Some pointed out how greed and selfishness had nearly derailed efforts to cooperate. Others questioned whether humanity truly deserved the advanced knowledge left behind by the Veilith. "What if we misuse it?" one commentator asked during a televised debate. "What if this second chance only leads to more destruction?" Claire followed these debates closely, feeling conflicted. On one hand, she admired the progress being made, communities rebuilding stronger than before, innovations improving lives, and a renewed sense of purpose driving people forward. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the lingering divisions. In her hospital, she treated patients from neighborhoods where tensions over resources remained high. Arguments broke out in waiting rooms, and some families avoided seeking care altogether due to mistrust of outsiders. One day, while tending to an elderly man injured in a fight over food supplies, Claire found herself wondering if humanity would ever fully escape its own flaws. The man, frail and weathered, looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he whispered. "I was just scared." Claire patted his hand gently, offering reassurance. "We're all scared sometimes," she said. "But we can choose to move past it, to find better ways." Her words stuck with her long after the man left. That evening, she shared her thoughts with Liam over dinner. "Do you think we'll ever stop fighting each other?" she asked. "Or is it part of who we are?" Liam considered the question carefully. "Maybe it's both," he said finally. "We fight because we're afraid, but we also have the ability to rise above it. That's what makes us human, not that we're perfect, but that we keep trying to be better." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics: the upcoming holidays, plans to visit Claire's parents, and whether they should adopt a pet. Life moved forward, carrying both the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Later that week, Liam received an email from Ethan Brooks inviting him to participate in a documentary about the Valeth's visit. At first, Liam hesitated, unsure if he wanted to relive those days. But Claire encouraged him, saying it might help others process what had happened. As filming began, Liam found himself reflecting on everything he'd witnessed, from solving puzzles in Chicago to rescuing neighbors during the wildfire. He realized that humanity's strength didn't lie in perfection, but in persistence. Every act of kindness, every choice to keep going despite fear, added up to something greater than any one person could achieve alone. By the time the documentary aired, it resonated deeply with audiences worldwide. Viewers saw themselves in the stories told, not as heroes, but as ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it mattered most. The message was clear: humanity's journey was far from over, but it had taken its first steps toward a brighter path. For Liam and Claire, the road ahead held uncertainty, but also hope. Together, they faced it with courage, knowing that even in imperfection there was beauty, and in resilience there was strength. Months passed since the Valeth departed, leaving Earth forever changed. The scars of the challenges remained: crumbled buildings, burned forests, and empty spaces where homes once stood. But so did the lessons learned. Humanity had proven its worth, not because it was flawless, but because it refused to give up. Slowly, life began to rebuild itself, piece by piece. Liam returned to teaching, though his classroom felt different now. His students were more curious, asking questions about space, science, and ethics that went beyond textbooks. They wanted to understand what it meant to be human in a universe far larger than they'd ever imagined. One day, as he explained the basics of physics, a boy raised his hand. "Mr. Carter," the boy asked, "do you think we'll ever see aliens again?" Liam smiled faintly, remembering the towering ship that had loomed over New York City. "Maybe," he said, "but if we do, I hope we're ready." Claire also noticed changes in her work at the hospital. Patients seemed more open about their struggles, sharing fears and hopes without hesitation. Many spoke of the trials they'd faced during the simulation, the choices they'd made, and the guilt or pride that lingered afterward. Claire listened carefully, offering comfort when words failed. She often thought about the young woman who had worried she'd failed the moral test. Now, months later, the woman visited Claire with a small bouquet of flowers. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "You helped me believe I wasn't broken." Claire accepted the flowers with a smile, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. These moments reminded her why she loved her job, not just for healing bodies, but for mending hearts. The advanced knowledge left by the Valeth sparked both excitement and caution. Scientists worked tirelessly to study the blueprints, unlocking new ways to harness energy and improve medicine. In rural areas, communities used the technology to build clean water systems and renewable power sources. Cities transformed, becoming greener and more sustainable as people embraced the responsibility that came with such gifts. Yet progress wasn't universal. Some regions struggled to adapt, lacking the resources or infrastructure needed to implement the innovations. Wealthier nations debated how much aid to offer, while poorer ones demanded fairness. Tensions flared, reminding everyone that humanity's flaws hadn't disappeared. They'd simply taken on new forms. Despite these challenges, pockets of unity emerged. A global initiative called Project Horizon brought together volunteers from all walks of life to share the benefits of the alien tech equitably. Mia Johnson, the college student who had gained attention for her resourcefulness during the simulation, became a key figure in the movement. Her passion inspired others to join, creating networks of collaboration across borders. One evening, Liam and Claire sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in months, the city felt peaceful. Traffic hummed steadily in the distance, and children played in the park down the street. It was a simple moment, yet it carried profound meaning. "You know," Liam said after a long silence, "I keep thinking about what Ethan said, that this was never just about passing or failing. It was about showing who we are." Claire nodded, sipping her tea. "And who are we?" "Imperfect," Liam replied with a chuckle. "But trying. Isn't that enough?" "It has to be," Claire said quietly. "Because if we stop trying, then what's the point?" The announcement from the Vailith brought a wave of emotions that swept across the planet. Cheers erupted in some places, while in others, people collapsed to their knees in tears of relief. The weight of uncertainty had finally lifted, but it left behind a strange mix of exhaustion and gratitude. Humanity had passed the ultimate test, a feat no other species in the galaxy had achieved. Yet the victory felt bittersweet, as if the cost of proving themselves had been too high. Liam and Claire sat together on the steps of their apartment building, watching the sun rise over a city still scared by the simulation. Smoke lingered in the air, and the distant hum of cleanup crews echoed through the streets. Despite the damage, there was a sense of quiet determination in the way people moved, clearing debris, helping neighbors rebuild, and sharing whatever they had left. It was as though the world had taken its first shaky breath after holding it for days. "They said we passed," Claire murmured, her voice soft but filled with wonder. "Do you think they expected us to?" Liam shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe they didn't, but I think that's why we did it. We surprised them." Claire smiled faintly, leaning her head against his shoulder. She thought about all the moments she'd witnessed during the final challenge. The bravery of strangers, the selflessness of volunteers, and the sheer willpower that kept everyone going when giving up seemed easier. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was resilient, and maybe, she realized, that was enough. As news spread about the outcome, governments began organizing efforts to assess the damage and plan for recovery. Leaders praised the unity shown during the crisis, urging citizens to carry that spirit forward. Yet not everyone was ready to celebrate. In some regions, anger simmered beneath the surface. Resources had been stretched thin, and accusations of hoarding or favoritism sparked tensions. The same divisions that had surfaced earlier now threatened to widen once again. Liam noticed this shift firsthand when he returned to his role as a teacher. His students were eager to talk about what had happened, but their conversations often turned heated. Some argued that humanity deserved recognition for surviving the test, while others pointed out how close they had come to failure. One student, a quiet boy named Alex, raised his hand hesitantly during class discussion. "Do you think we really changed?" he asked. "Or are we just pretending until things go back to normal?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. Liam paused, considering how best to respond. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said finally. "But every choice we make, from helping someone in need to standing up for what's right, brings us closer to being better than we were before." Claire faced similar challenges at the hospital. While many patients expressed hope for the future, others struggled with lingering trauma from the events. A young woman who had lost her home in the wildfires confided in Claire, admitting she couldn't stop thinking about the choices she'd made during the moral trials. "What if I picked wrong?" she whispered. "What if I failed?" "You didn't fail," Claire reassured her gently. "None of us got everything right. But we kept trying, even when it hurt. That's what matters." Amid the rebuilding process, stories of heroism continued to emerge. People spoke of Mia Johnson, the college student who had helped organize supply runs using scaven-gauge tech. Her actions inspired others to create networks of support, ensuring that no community was left behind. Even small acts of kindness, sharing meals, offering shelter, lending a listening ear, became symbols of humanity's potential to overcome adversity. Then came the Veilith's parting gift: advanced knowledge shared freely with Earth. Blueprints for sustainable energy sources, medical breakthroughs, and innovative technologies appeared online, sparking excitement and debate. Scientists marveled at the possibilities, while ethicists warned about the responsibilities that came with such power. Humanity now stood on the brink of a new era, one defined not by survival, but by growth. For Liam and Claire, the days ahead promised both challenges and opportunities. They knew life wouldn't return to the way it was before. The scars ran too deep for that. But as they looked around at the resilience of their neighbors, friends, and family, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Imperfection was part of being human, but so was hope. And in that hope lay the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The final challenge arrived without warning, catching the world off guard. One moment, life was continuing as normally as possible under the shadow of the Veilith's presence. The next, chaos erupted. Across the globe, natural disasters struck with terrifying precision. Floods surged through coastal cities, earthquakes shattered infrastructure, and wildfires raged uncontrollably in dry regions. It wasn't random destruction. It felt deliberate, like a simulation designed to test humanity's ability to adapt under extreme pressure. In Brooklyn, Liam and Claire woke to the sound of alarms blaring outside their apartment window. Smoke filled the air, and distant sirens wailed as emergency services scrambled to respond. Their neighborhood, usually quiet and orderly, had transformed into a scene of panic. People ran through the streets carrying belongings, children cried, and cars honked endlessly as traffic gridlocked. A wildfire spreading from nearby industrial zones threatened to engulf the area, forcing evacuations. "We need to move," Liam said urgently, grabbing a backpack they'd prepared days earlier for emergencies. Inside were basic supplies: water bottles, non-perishable food, flashlights, and a first aid kit. Claire nodded, her face pale but determined. Together, they joined the stream of people heading toward safer ground. As they navigated the crowded streets, Liam noticed something remarkable. Despite the fear and confusion, acts of kindness were everywhere. Strangers helped elderly neighbors carry heavy bags. Parents shared snacks with hungry children who had been separated from their families. Volunteers directed traffic and guided lost individuals to shelters. Even amid disaster, humanity refused to give up. Claire found herself drawn into these efforts almost instinctively. When she spotted a young boy wandering alone, tears streaming down his face, she immediately knelt beside him. "Hey, sweetie," she said softly. "Are you looking for someone?" The boy nodded, clutching a stuffed rabbit tightly. Claire took his hand and led him to a makeshift evacuation center set up in a local school gymnasium. There, volunteers worked tirelessly to reunite separated families. By the end of the day, Claire stayed on to assist, using her medical training to tend to minor injuries and calm frightened survivors. Liam, meanwhile, became part of an impromptu rescue crew organized by neighbors. With roads blocked and communication systems failing, they relied on word of mouth to locate those still trapped in danger zones. Armed with nothing more than flashlights, ropes, and sheer determination, the group ventured into flooded basements and crumbling buildings, pulling people to safety. Each successful rescue fueled their resolve, even as exhaustion weighed heavily on them. The scale of the disaster tested everyone's limits. Supplies dwindled quickly, and tempers flared as patience wore thin. Yet moments of cooperation outweighed the conflicts. In one instance, a store owner opened his shop to distribute bottled water and canned goods free of charge. In another, a teenager used social media to coordinate relief efforts, connecting stranded individuals with available resources. These small victories reminded Liam and Claire that humanity's greatest strength lay not in individual heroics, but in its capacity to come together when it mattered most. By the third day of the simulation, the situation began to stabilize. Emergency responders regained control over the fires, and engineers worked around the clock to repair damaged infrastructure. Shelters overflowed with displaced families, yet volunteers continued to arrive, offering whatever help they could. News outlets broadcast stories of resilience, highlighting the countless ways ordinary people had risen to the occasion. As the final hours ticked away, Liam and Claire stood side by side, watching the horizon. The alien ship still loomed above the city, silent and unmoving. Neither of them knew what the outcome would be, but they felt a quiet pride in how far humanity had come during this trial. They had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged battered but unbroken. When the voice of the Valeth finally spoke again, it carried a tone of solemn respect. Your species has demonstrated intelligence, morality, and adaptability. You have passed the ultimate test. Relief swept through the crowd gathered below, mingling with tears of joy and disbelief. For the first time in days, hope burned brighter than fear. Though the ordeal was over, Liam and Claire knew the lessons learned would stay with them forever. Humanity had proven its worth, not because it was perfect, but because it refused to stop fighting for a better future. News of the team's success in Chicago spread quickly, sparking a mix of hope and frustration around the world. While some celebrated the breakthrough, others criticized the decision to prioritize survival over knowledge or power. Debates raged on social media, in government meetings, and even among families gathered around dinner tables. The Valeth had forced humanity to confront difficult questions about its values, and not everyone agreed on the answers. Back in Brooklyn, Claire followed the updates with a growing sense of unease. She understood why Liam and his team had chosen survival. It made sense given the circumstances, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the challenges were designed to divide people rather than unite them. Everywhere she looked, cracks were forming. Neighbors argued over whether the aliens could be trusted. Politicians clashed over how resources should be allocated for future tests. Even within her own hospital, tensions ran high as staff debated whether focusing on practical solutions was more important than exploring ethical dilemmas. Meanwhile, Liam returned home tired but determined. The experience in Chicago had changed him. He'd seen firsthand how fragile cooperation could be, how easily fear and doubt could drive people apart. Yet he'd also witnessed moments of brilliance, ordinary people working together to solve problems far beyond their usual scope. It gave him hope, even as the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The second challenge proved to be just as daunting as the first. At each of the locations tied to the decoded coordinates, teams uncovered artifacts containing moral dilemmas projected directly into participants' minds. These scenarios varied widely, forcing individuals to make impossible choices. In one instance, a man in London was asked whether he would sacrifice his own child to save 5 strangers. In another, a woman in Tokyo had to decide between stealing medicine to cure her sick brother or leaving it for others who needed it just as badly. Claire encountered one of these trials while volunteering at the shelter. As she helped distribute food to displaced families, a strange sensation washed over her, a vivid vision of a burning building filled with children. A voice inside her head demanded an answer. Would you risk your life to save them, knowing you might fail? The question paralyzed her, bringing tears to her eyes. She thought of Liam, of the patients she cared for daily, of all the lives hanging in the balance. After what felt like an eternity, she whispered, "Yes." The moment she answered, the vision faded, leaving her shaken but resolute. Others in the shelter reported similar experiences, though their questions differed. Some emerged angry or defeated, convinced they'd failed. Others walked away with a renewed sense of purpose, as if the trial had stripped away layers of fear and self-doubt. Claire realized that the Veilith weren't just testing humanity's ability to choose. They were revealing the depth of its flaws and strengths. As reports poured in from across the globe, patterns began to emerge. No single decision was universally right or wrong. Instead, the outcomes depended on context, emotion, and perspective. This realization unsettled many, including Liam. When he heard about Claire's trial, he held her close, listening silently as she recounted the harrowing details. "I don't know if I did the right thing," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." "You did the best you could," Liam said gently. "That's all anyone can ask." Despite the divisions caused by the challenges, glimpses of unity began to surface. Communities rallied around those who struggled, offering support and encouragement. Stories of courage and compassion spread, reminding people of their shared humanity. Slowly, the focus shifted from individual survival to collective resilience. Yet time was running out. With only 3 days left until the final challenge, the pressure mounted. Governments released statements urging calm and cooperation, though few believed they could enforce such ideals. Meanwhile, scientists worked tirelessly to predict what the last test might involve. Rumors circulated about environmental disasters or large-scale simulations, but nothing concrete emerged. Liam stared at the map of Earth dotted with the locations of the completed trials. Each site represented a piece of humanity's soul laid bare, its fears, hopes, and contradictions. Whatever came next, he knew it would demand everything they had. And somehow, despite the uncertainty, he felt ready. The discovery of the coordinates sent ripples of both excitement and fear across the globe. Governments scrambled to send teams to the designated locations, while independent groups of scientists, volunteers, and curious citizens began organizing their own expeditions. The Veilith had promised that these sites held pieces of the second challenge, but no one knew what to expect. Would it be another puzzle, a physical trial, or something far more dangerous? Liam found himself pulled deeper into the effort than he'd ever imagined. After his contribution to decoding the first challenge, Ethan Brooks invited him to join a small team tasked with investigating one of the sites. It was located in an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of Chicago, miles away from Liam's home in Brooklyn. Though hesitant to leave Claire behind, Liam felt a sense of duty. If humanity was going to survive this test, every bit of help mattered. Claire, for her part, supported his decision but couldn't hide her worry. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said as they packed his bag the night before he left. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded his clothes, and Liam could see the exhaustion etched on her face. Between her long hours at the hospital and the endless stream of panicked patients, she hadn't slept much since the Veilith arrived. "I will," Liam assured her, pulling her into a tight hug. "And I'll call you as soon as I can." The next morning, Liam boarded a train bound for Chicago with a mix of nerves and determination. When he arrived, he met up with the rest of the team, which included Ethan, 2 engineers named Sarah and Mark, and a young college student named Mia Johnson, who had volunteered after hearing about the project online. Despite their different backgrounds, they all shared the same goal: to uncover whatever secrets the Veilith had hidden at the site. The industrial park was eerily quiet when they arrived. Rows of rusted warehouses stood like skeletons against the overcast sky, their windows shattered and doors hanging off hinges. The air smelled faintly of oil and decay. Guided by GPS readings, the group made their way to a specific building marked on the map derived from the decoded sequence. Inside, they found nothing at first, just empty rooms and piles of debris. But then Maya spotted something glinting in the corner. It was a small metallic object shaped like a sphere, resting atop a pile of broken crates. As they approached, the sphere began to hum softly, emitting a soft blue light. Without warning, it projected a series of images onto the walls. Scenes of Earth appeared: cities, forests, oceans, but they were overlaid with strange symbols and equations. Then came the questions. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through the room. You must choose. What is most valuable? Knowledge, power, or survival? The team exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had expected a moral dilemma so soon. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Each option seemed valid yet flawed. Knowledge fueled progress, but without power, it might remain useless. Power ensured control, but at what cost? Survival was essential, but how far would they go to achieve it? Ethan broke the silence. This isn't just asking us to pick an answer, he said thoughtfully. It's testing our values, who we are as a species. Sarah frowned. But how do we decide? There's no right answer here. Mia stepped forward, her voice surprisingly steady despite her youth. Maybe that's the point. Maybe there isn't supposed to be a right answer. Maybe they want to see how we think. Her words sparked a debate among the group. Some argued for survival, believing it was the foundation of everything else. Others leaned toward knowledge, insisting that understanding was humanity's greatest strength. Liam listened quietly, weighing each argument. He thought about Claire, about the patients she cared for, about the countless lives depending on people making the best choices under impossible circumstances. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a consensus. They chose survival, not because it was perfect, but because it represented hope. Hope that humanity could endure, adapt, and grow stronger together. As they confirmed their choice, the sphere emitted a final flash of light before going dark. The projection vanished, leaving the room silent once more. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Liam glanced at his teammates, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. One challenge down, 2 to go. Whatever lay ahead, he knew it wouldn't be easy. The days following the arrival of the Valeth felt like a blur. News outlets worked around the clock, broadcasting updates and theories about the alien visitors. Scientists debated the nature of the challenges while politicians argued over how to respond. Some called for unity, urging humanity to work together as one. Others prepared for war, convinced that the Valeth's test was merely a cover for invasion. Amid the chaos, Liam and Claire tried to make sense of it all from their small apartment in Brooklyn. Liam spent hours glued to his laptop, scouring forums and articles for clues about the aliens. As a physics teacher, he had always been fascinated by space, but this was something entirely different. The Valeth hadn't provided any details about the upcoming challenges, only vague hints about intelligence, morality, and adaptability. What did those words even mean? How would they measure such abstract qualities? Liam scribbled notes on a notepad, trying to piece together possibilities, though none of them seemed reassuring. Claire, on the other hand, threw herself into her work at the hospital. With panic spreading across the city, emergency rooms were flooded with patients suffering from anxiety attacks or injuries caused by stampedes. She often came home exhausted, her scrubs stained and her face pale. Yet she refused to sit still, volunteering extra shifts at a local shelter where displaced families gathered. Many of them had fled their homes after hearing rumors of impending doom, unsure if they'd ever return. One evening, as Liam scrolled through online discussions, he stumbled upon a live stream featuring Ethan Brooks, a well-known astrophysicist. Ethan was part of a government task force assembled to decode the first challenge. His tired eyes and disheveled hair suggested long nights of work, but his voice carried an urgency that grabbed Liam's attention. On the screen, Ethan explained that the Valeth had transmitted a series of complex symbols embedded within their initial message. These symbols appeared to form a mathematical sequence, though its purpose remained unclear. "This isn't just a puzzle," Ethan said during the broadcast. "It's a test of our ability to think critically and solve problems under pressure. If we can crack this code, we might unlock the next step." Intrigued, Liam leaned closer to the screen. He wasn't a mathematician, but he understood enough to recognize patterns when he saw them. Grabbing his notebook, He began jotting down ideas, comparing them to screenshots shared by amateur enthusiasts online. Hours passed as he worked, fueled by coffee and determination. By morning, he had pieced together a partial solution, a string of numbers that matched fragments others had posted in forums. Encouraged, Liam decided to share his findings. Using a crowdsourcing platform set up by volunteers, he uploaded his notes along with a brief explanation. To his surprise, someone responded almost immediately. It was Ethan Brooks himself. "Your input aligns with what we've been working on," Ethan wrote in a private message. "We could use more perspectives like yours. Can you help?" Liam hesitated. He was just a high school teacher, not a scientist or expert. But then he thought of Claire, tirelessly helping strangers at the shelter, and realized that everyone had a role to play, even him. With a deep breath, he agreed. Meanwhile, tensions continued to rise outside. Protests erupted in major cities, with some groups accusing world leaders of incompetence. Conspiracy theories spread faster than facts, sowing distrust and fear. At the same time, acts of kindness began to emerge. Neighbors sharing food, communities organizing support networks. Humanity's response was messy and unpredictable, yet there were glimmers of hope. Back in Brooklyn, Liam sat at his desk late into the night, collaborating with Ethan and other contributors. Together, they refined the solution bit by bit, inching closer to understanding the Valeth's intentions. Claire watched him from the doorway, her arms crossed. "Do you really think this will work?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Liam admitted, "but I have to try." As dawn broke over the city, the team finally cracked the code. The sequence revealed coordinates scattered across Earth, each location tied to the second challenge. For the first time since the Valeth's arrival, Liam allowed himself a flicker of optimism. Maybe, just maybe, humanity stood a chance after all. Liam Carter was pushing a shopping cart down the narrow aisles of the grocery store when he first noticed the strange light outside. It wasn't the usual glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the windows, but something brighter, almost unnatural. He paused by the cereal boxes and squinted toward the glass doors at the front of the store. People were pointing upward, their faces frozen in awe or fear. Curious, Liam left his cart where it was and walked closer to see what had caught everyone's attention. Outside, the sky was no longer blue. Instead, an enormous shadow loomed over the city, stretching across buildings and streets like a giant hand blotting out the world below. At its source was a massive object hovering silently above New York City. It looked nothing like any aircraft Liam had ever seen. Smooth, metallic, and impossibly large, it seemed to shimmer faintly as if alive. The sight made his stomach twist with unease. Inside the store, other shoppers had stopped what they were doing to stare. Claire Carter, Liam's wife, stood near the produce section holding a bag of apples. She hadn't noticed the commotion yet, too focused on deciding between Fuji and Honeycrisp. When she finally looked up and saw the worried expressions around her, she quickly joined Liam by the door. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Before Liam could answer, a deep, resonant voice filled the air. It didn't come from speakers or radios. It seemed to emanate directly from the ship itself. Everyone froze as the voice spoke in calm, measured tones. "We are the Valeth," it said. "We have traveled across stars and galaxies to observe your species. You now stand before us for the ultimate test." The words sent a chill through the crowd. Some people clutched their phones, recording videos or searching for updates online. Others whispered prayers under their breath. A few bolted for the exits, desperate to get home to their families. But most stayed rooted to the spot, unable to tear their eyes away from the alien vessel. Liam pulled out his phone and opened a news app. Headlines were already flooding in. "Alien ship appears over NYC. Is this the end of humanity?" One article claimed the ship had appeared simultaneously over every major city on Earth. Another speculated about invasion scenarios based on science fiction movies. None of it felt real to Liam. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of elaborate prank. Claire squeezed his arm tightly. "Do you think they're serious?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. "I don't know," Liam admitted. He glanced at the screen again and scrolled through live footage showing similar scenes playing out in cities around the globe. In Tokyo, people knelt on the ground, bowing toward the sky. In London, soldiers gathered in formation, weapons raised but uncertain. Everywhere, there was confusion and fear. The voice continued, cutting through the noise. "Within 7 days, you will face 3 challenges. These tests will measure your intelligence, morality, and ability to adapt. Failure will result in the termination of your species. Success will grant you recognition among the stars." The announcement ended abruptly, leaving behind an eerie silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the reality of the situation began to sink in. People started talking all at once, their voices rising in panic. What did the aliens want? How could humanity possibly pass such a test? Was this really happening? Liam turned to Claire, who looked pale but determined. "We should go home," he said firmly. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together." As they pushed their way through the crowded aisles, abandoning their groceries behind, Liam couldn't help but wonder if humanity was truly ready for what lay ahead.